Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to today's episode of Locked On Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and thank you for making Locked On Canucks your first listen of the day. My name is Nick Bonney. I'm joined as always by my brilliant co-host, Lachlan and today we're going to talk all things Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes contract extensions. Yes, the saga is over, Lachlan. Finally.
Yes, finally. Well, I mean, not officially yet, obviously. The Canucks have not made it official yet.
It's not official yet. It's pretty close. I would say it's 95% there.
Yeah, the minute you start getting people like Elliot Friedman tweeting about it, the second you get Pierre LeBrun or Chris Johnston, or obviously here in our own market, the people who actually were doing a lot of the breaking.
Yeah, put some respect on Satiar Shaw's name. He broke that Quinn Hughes name.
He sure did. Sat did. Irfan Gaffar had a couple tidbits here and there. Obviously, Rick Dhaliwal always has the inside scoop, and then Drancer was out there doing his due diligence as well. Somebody put it. I forget who exactly tweeted this yesterday. Somebody put it very well that like it's not often in a lot of other NHL markets that local reporters are the ones breaking those like big contract deals. It's often either like the big national guys, or it's just the team doing it themselves. It's not often you get the beat reporters getting in there and getting the scoop. But here we are, looking at a situation where your prediction almost came pretty close to true. I think we actually, we were both almost pretty right in different spots. Like we both kind of had we got a little bit of both of what we each wanted out of these deals, which we're going to go over today.
I remember my prediction. It was 3x8 for both players, and that came almost spot on for Elias Pettersson, not so much for Quinn Hughes, although the AAV. What was your prediction? I don't remember your prediction.
My prediction was I was expecting Quinn Hughes to get in that like 8x8 range. It's a little bit less, like it's coming in at around 6 years. So, and I believe the AAV is also about like 7. So I was a little bit close on the term, a few years off on the actual contract term. But overall, I'm not complaining about those contracts. I don't think you are either.
No, not at all. I think both deals are pretty fair, but the Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes are about to put pen to paper on 2 different contracts for the Vancouver Canucks to get them in training camp finally, so we can see them in some preseason games and get them warmed up before the regular season starts in earnest. Elias Pettersson is reportedly about to sign a 3-year, $7.7 million AAV deal. Quinn Hughes, a bit longer deal, 6 years with an average annual value of $7.75 million. I recorded a video for Locked On Now last night, and I said at the time, especially the Quinn Hughes deal, I think this is a very, very good deal for the Vancouver Canucks. You're essentially getting the prime of this guy's career for $7.75 a season. And look, Quinn Hughes, he had a down year last year. Yes, we all know that. But I think that was more circumstance. The whole team had a bad down year than Quinn Hughes just not being able to replicate the awesome rookie season that he had where he almost won the Calder over Cale Makar. So I think that Quinn Hughes deal is very fair. I think, again, you're getting Quinn Hughes for the prime of his career for $7.75 essentially every year. And I still think, and I'm sure you agree with me, Quinn Hughes still has the ability to be one of the premier defensemen in the National Hockey League. So when you can get that under $8 million a season, great job by Jimbo. Great deal, Jimbo. We're all very happy for you. Elias Pettersson, 3 years, $7.7 million a season. So just under the 3x8 I predicted, not to brag or anything. You know what? This is a tough one because sure, it would have been nice to go long with Elias Pettersson. You can never go wrong going with these franchise centers long-term, but just with the cap space the Canucks had, the situation they're in, they're really only going to be able to go long with one of these players, right? And You mentioned it on a previous episode of Locked On Canucks that it was probably going to have to be Quinn Hughes because that was probably the easier long-term deal to do in terms of AAV. So, yeah, 7.7 for Elias Pettersson. I would have loved to see Elias Pettersson go long-term, but that is still a great deal for Elias Pettersson in the short term, right? Like, he is probably worth on a long-term deal, I'm thinking 9.5. So to get him at 7.7 for the next 3 seasons, including this one, you have a bit of space in the next 3 years to build around that before you have to pay him again. So for both deals in all, I like them. I like the Quinn Hughes deal more, obviously, because you have that long-term certainty of Quinn Hughes at that price. But I think both deals it was pretty well done by Jim Benning and the Vancouver Canucks.
For sure. I think both of them are they did I think they did a very good job at finding a way to make both contracts work in a way that's beneficial to them, to the team, because that is at the end of the day what you need what if you're a general manager, your job is not necessarily always to find the best deal for the player, it's to find the best deal for you and what works for you. But I think they found a deal here that more or less works for both sides pretty well and gets both sides what they want. Obviously, Pettersson wanted a lot more money and probably could and you could make a very good argument that he already deserves that more money from a big contract, but the Canucks don't have it, so they don't have that cap room available to them. So the contract that they got for a bridge deal that still keeps them in RFA territory, so you get to go to that second negotiation and keeping it under 8 million, because usually you see a lot of those bridge contracts, the idea is that they purposely pay them, say, a lot more than their market value just to appease them for taking the shorter term and going to that second contract. The fact that they were able to keep that number under 8 is honestly shocking, because you could argue he's worth already a lot more than 7.7. And Hughes, on the other hand, is a little bit of a different is an interesting situation. Again, like I've said before, young defensemen in today's NHL, young puck moving defensemen command an insanely high price. And that is because of how rare and how hard it is to find a generational, bona fide, good puck moving defenseman.
Yeah,
Like,
ask any Canucks fan how hard that is. We've been waiting 50 years for one.
yeah, exactly.
The Canucks have never really had one.
The Canucks have never had like it. I think there were a lot of cases. Like I remember in Quinn's rookie year thinking like, okay, he's already like one of the top 5 best defensemen in franchise history. And that's more to do with the fact that there just haven't been a lot of amazing defensemen in the Canucks history. They've had some very good ones. They've had some fan favorites. They haven't had like a absolute like this is a game breaking sort of defenseman. They've come close. Like Alex Edler is clearly the number 1 defenseman, but he was never a game breaker.
He came pretty close to being that stud number. I remember in the 2011-12 season, he had like 50 something points, looking like a stud, and then like never really became that number 1 stud defenseman, right? Which is fine. Like he was still a very serviceable defenseman for a number of years. But yeah, the Canucks have never really had that, Norris caliber. I would say emphasis on Norris caliber defenseman before, and they have that, I think, long term in Quinn Hughes. So it's hard to get mad about the Quinn Hughes deal, I think.
Yeah, I will say that just based on, what, again, like I said, the rarity of a player of his caliber, I would have liked to see them get that term up to 8. I would have liked to seen them buy into those extra 2 years, even if it cost a little more money to do so. But at the same time, I'm not going to complain all that much about, getting a franchise defenseman
You were just complaining
under
though.
8.
You were just
I'm not
complaining.
okay. There's a difference between complaining and critiquing. I feel like there's a very important difference between, I'm allowed to.
That all
I'm
sound
allowed
like
to,
complaining to
I'm
me.
allowed to. No. There's a very important difference between I'm allowed to give constructive criticism without going into the.
Is that what we're
"Well,
calling
why
complaining
isn't it
now?
like this?" No. How dare you? How dare you? But you buy 2 UFA years out of this. You're buying two of his free agent years out of this. You would have liked to seen a little more, maybe, but at the price that you're getting him for, it's honestly manageable. By the time you get to renegotiating on that contract again, like you'll still he'll cost probably a lot more, but you will have gotten most of his prime years. So you can either at that point decide whether or not you want to do another long-term deal with him. It might be beneficial to you, or if you're feeling it, maybe by that point in 6 years, the team's already kind of reached its peak and sort of decides that maybe it's ready to move on. It's a good 6 is a good healthy number to land on, especially at that price range.
Well, Cale Makar also got 6 years at 6 years from the Colorado Avalanche, right? So I think that was probably the main comparable Quinn Hughes'
Yes.
camp was looking at, right? Was Cale Makar. He got the 6 years. So not surprising to me, Quinn Hughes got 6 years, right?
Yeah, probably they were looking at Makar, especially because Makar obviously won the Calder the year Hughes was the runner up. I think that plays in a lot in those negotiations. If you if you win the trophy, that immediately sets a market behind you, kind of thing. It's kind of like a grading curve almost. And they obviously looked at, say, like Rasmus Dahlin's contract as well. I'm sure Miro Heiskanen's recent deal came into play as well. All of these guys very much in that similar vein of very good young puck moving defensemen. And Hughes, and they're coming in with Hughes. They're getting Hughes for 6 years on a very team friendly contract. But while still paying him clearly the most of any defenseman on the team. Same thing goes for Pettersson. Both of them are going to be the two highest paid players on the team next season. And it still leaves a little bit of money left over to improve the team for this season. So that's not a bad thing at all. They've done pretty well here.
Yeah, and for Elias Pettersson's deal, obviously, like I said, I think you'd agree with me, Lachlan, because I think I know the way you think now after doing this podcast with you for a week and a half. You would have liked to see Elias Pettersson go long term with the Vancouver Canucks. Again, having a franchise center locked up long term is never really a bad bet. But now for the next 3 years, you have Elias Pettersson at a pretty good price, right? Like under $8 million for Elias Pettersson. I take that every day of the week.
Yes, your biggest worry really with like say a bridge deal, of course, is just the fact that eventually in 3 years, which isn't that long from now, really, it's not. It's by the end of this season, it'll be 2. That you're gonna have to make a bigger commitment again, and the way the Canucks have sometimes handled their cap situation at times. You worry that you worry about what's going to happen that second time around when there's only, I believe, one UFA year left. It's going to be interesting to see if this time around the Canucks are more careful about managing what their cap situation will look like in year 3, and how much money they allocate and leave to make room for his next contract, and that goes for what's going to happen, say, next season with, I believe Brock Besser's contract is up. His bridge deal's up at the end of this year. Bo Horvat's is up pretty soon from now too. JT Miller's is up pretty soon. There's a lot of important contracts coming up in the near future, and you hope the Canucks looked at this situation that they kind of put themselves in here with Pettersson and go, okay, we can't have this again. We need to, if we're gonna leave money, if we're gonna have sign guys to long-term deals, we need to make space. We need to leave as much room as possible for those guys when that contract negotiation comes into play.
Yeah, and that's the worry if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan is, they get themselves into another cap crunch in 3 years and they don't have the money to pay Elias Pettersson, and they're kind of screwed that way. And that really has been one of the critiques of the Benning era, right? Is the long-term planning. Jim Benning is very relatable in the sense that it just says, you know what, that's future Jim Benning's problem. Today, I'm just going to sign these deals. Tomorrow, I'm going to worry about the Elias Pettersson deal in 3 years. And as plenty of examples of that coming back to bite him. So that's a good segue to talk about, I think, the long-term ramifications of these new deals for the Vancouver Canucks. But before we do that, I want to talk to everyone about Fantrax. Fantasy hockey season is fast approaching, and I'm going to give you an inside track on the absolute best fantasy hockey platform in the industry. It's Fantrax. Fantrax free NHL Fantasy Hockey League Manager. It's the most customizable, easy to use, and feature-rich platform in the industry. This is where I host all of my fantasy hockey leagues, and as a commissioner of some, I can tell you I will never, ever leave Fantrax. Sign up for free today And as a special offer for Locked On, your team fans, you'll be entered to win an official signed Nathan McKinnon jersey. Simply go to fantrax.com/locked on and sign up today. Okay, so let's get into, Lachlan, the long-term ramifications of these two deals for the Vancouver Canucks. And you did mention it a couple of minutes ago, but now the Vancouver Canucks over the next few offseasons are going to pretty much have to run a gauntlet of contract negotiations, right? Like you mentioned it, next at the end of this season, Brock Besser is going to be a arbitration eligible RFA. I believe his qualifying offer is around $7.5 million. So that means that's the minimum he's going to have to make on his next new deal, right? Is $7.5 million. And the season after, Bo Horvat and JT Miller are both RFAs. Then you have a bit of a break, in 2024, 25, Tanner Pearson, Jason Dixon going to be off the books. So is Tyler Myers. They could obviously re-sign some of those, but those are going to be the UFAs in that. So you have a bit of a break there. And then obviously the next season, you're going to have Elias Pettersson. So it's going to be pretty tough. But it's going to take some planning, and it's going to be a gauntlet. Like every season, for the most part, every offseason, for the most part, you are going to have some sort of big piece of this core to renegotiate a new deal with, right, Lachlan? It's going to be tough. It's going to take some planning.
Yeah, and that's not even factoring in, say, the potential of, like, say, in 3 years, Vasily Podkolzin's entry-level contract is also going to be up. So you got to throw that in there. You never, and any prospects that might jump into the mix and make a big difference. Nils Höglander, I'm sure, has got, I believe, 2 more years before his next deal has to be negotiated. There's a lot of big important deals that are going to be all come together and over the next few years. And this is the what separates the best GMs from the not so great ones, is how able are you to sell a vision to players? How good are you at being able to sell them on the fact that this is not only is this a Stanley Cup champion, but on the idea that this is a team that managed by you as the GM, that you're going to build a winner. And by taking, say, either less money or less term, what have you, there is that they will be able to compete and build a champion. You see it in, like, say, Tampa Bay, where they've done an insanely good job at being able to take guys like Nikita Kucherov and Steven Stamkos and pay them arguably way less than their market value.
Well, it helps when there's no state income tax.
See, that is true. That is definitely true. But I also think that I think there are ways around that. Like, we don't talk about it enough. There are definitely ways to essentially to make it more on feasible and say take less of that income tax, that whole income tax thing out of the equation. I think, especially like I think I mentioned this on a few episodes ago, like the whole, if you're a player in Vancouver, if you're a superstar in Vancouver, the amount of money you're going to make on endorsements and appearances at other things, like the amount of money you can make away from the rink is astronomical.
And I remember this conversation too, Lachlan, and I said, if that's the case, then every big free agent from Ontario would sign it with the Maple Leafs.
But they don't always want that. But they don't always want to play in Toronto. They might not want to. That's not always That's always factoring in the. That's fact. You have to factor in, obviously, whether or not they even want to play in that market. So it's about it. If it's about money, there are ways to fix that. If there are ways that a player doesn't want, isn't interested, or doesn't like the focus, essentially, then that's something you can't fix. But all of these players seem to like playing in Vancouver. They seem to be very comfortable playing in this market. And I think if the Canucks are doing their job well, as management, they should be able to sell them on the idea that they can build a winner around them, that they can that by taking, say, like a little less money here and there, they can make it worth their while, and specifically in the form of a championship. But that has to start with management proving it to them by building around them and bringing in the right pieces around them. They seem to have done a little bit of that this year with Connor Garland and Jason Dickinson coming in, but two players don't make a team. So you got to just keep going. You got to keep showing that you're able to put a competitive team out there around those core guys.
Yeah, and that's why it's going to be very important for the Vancouver Canucks to at least be competitive for the next few years. Because if there's a down year like that 2021 season, like that last season, you can bet like one of Bo Horvat or JT Miller is walking. I would say
Yeah,
more JT Miller at this point because he doesn't have that long-term connection to the Canucks. He wasn't drafted by the team like Horvat. He's not the
and
captain.
he's not the
Uh,
captain. Yeah.
yeah, what have you. But it's going to be important for the Canucks every year to try and be a somewhat competitive team because they have a step back, and I can see one of these UFAs walking. But Lachlan, we don't have to worry about the next contract for Quinn Hughes because that's 6 years from now, right? Who knows if we're ever going to be doing this podcast in 6 years' time, right? Like, who knows where we're going to be in our lives in 6 years? But Elias Pettersson, like in 3 years, he's going to be an RFA, but he's going to need a new deal. And maybe we're getting our head of ourselves here, but this is what I love about talking to Vancouver Canucks. We can time this discussion right this second as soon as he signs his second deal. What do you think Elias Pettersson's third deal is going to be like for the Vancouver Canucks?
Oh man, he hasn't even signed the first. I guess it's so tough to say just because of right now the cap is flat, right? It's supposed to be flat for I
Yeah, and that's
believe
what
the
you're
next
banking on if
2.
you're Jim Benning and company, right? Is the cap going up in the next 3 years, so you have a bit more wiggle room when it comes to negotiations.
Right. I mean, yeah, you gotta hope that the cap's going up. I mean, I forget exactly how many years they said it's going to stay flat. I believe it was 3. I think they said from starting this year, this is the first of 3. So by the time I guess Pettersson's contract expires, that should be going up. And by that point, you'll get to factor in the all the money that came in from the ESPN deals this year, the TNT contract, any money they might get from renegotiating their Canadian rights. I believe that comes up soon. I believe that deal with Rogers ends pretty soon, so they might sign a new deal here in Canada, relatively in that timeline. You also factor in, say, the money that comes in from the expansion franchises in Vegas and Seattle. Obviously Vegas is a little bit more set in the system already, but Seattle's brand new. That money's going to be that all the revenue from that's going to come in over time in
Is
sharing.
that salary
So
cap though? Because that just goes straight to the owners. Does
There
that
like
affect the salary cap?
there is like shared revenue, and like the general basically it's about like the health of the league, right? Like if the league is making more money year over year, then that brings the cap up. That brings that number up with it. So yeah, as long as people are going back to things and spending money, and it's that, and other companies are spending money on the league, that all brings that cap up. So I guess you could see a situation where Pettersson gets closer to, say, even in that double digit range by that point. I think it's I thought he honestly might get there on this first contract had the pandemic not happened. But yeah, I think you'll probably see something creep into closer, say, into that like 10, 11 range that we're seeing, right, that we've seen already with guys like McDavid and Matthews. I think you might down the line that might be where Pettersson ends up as well.
For every RFA deal that's signed, it makes the Mitch Marner contract for the Leafs look worse and worse. Sorry, I had to get a Leafs
Yeah.
shot in this podcast somehow. You know
Yeah.
I can't resist it, Lachlan.
Yeah, they should. Yeah, that was a tough contract for sure. I think,
He
especially
took
because
him
I
to the
think personally
cleaners. He took him to the cleaners.
he sure did. I mean, his agent did a great job. I would have given that. Yeah, if I personally, I would have given that amount of money to William Nylander for rather than him. But to each their own, I guess.
All right, yeah, that's enough Leafs talk for this episode. That's way too much Leafs talk, but I had to get that shot in.
Yeah, no.
So in just a moment, we're going to talk more about these Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes contracts, but how they affect the roster decisions heading up into the season because now they're back in camp. Some people are going to lose their jobs on the big team. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about Built Bar. Do you know that Built Bar has so many delicious flavors? There is something truly for everyone. When you talk to a Built Bar fan, they're definitely passionate about their favorite flavors. They have flavors such as coconut, cherry barcia, raspberry, classic flavors like orange, strawberries, cookies and cream. I'm a classic flavor guy myself. I like the basic orange, but to each their own. If you haven't tried all the flavors, guess what? You can get a mixed box where you get 2 of each of the 9 flavors. Not only are Built Bar flavors the best tasting, but also very healthy for you. They have 17 to 18 grams of protein, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Order today. Go to builtbar.com and use the promo code LOCK15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code 15 for 15% off at built.com.
There's only one place that has you covered and one place that we trust, and that is betonline.ag. We're back and better than ever. All eyes are on the gridiron as teams are back for another football season. And as always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. With a new updated site and interface, even more odds, props, and contests, BetOnline continues to be the number one source for everything football. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Don't forget to use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From football, basketball, boxing, hockey, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, Lachlan, I was checking out BetOnline last night. They have props for goalie save percentage. That might be be something you might have to get into. Betting on goalie save percentages. None for Thatcher Demko just yet. I was looking. They don't have one for Demko just yet. But they have one for all the big goalies. That might be something to get you into sports gambling, I think. Betting on goalies that way.
That's a dangerous game for me, my friend. I will say with save percentage, it's a little bit of a team stat as well. Like you got to factor in, like, depending on, say, if you're a team that doesn't give up a lot of shots, that can really factor into where you end up on that scale. So maybe I need to see where this Canucks blue line is going to go before I do any save percentage prop betting. I need to see how porous the blue line is.
I think you're going to be pleasantly, maybe not pleasantly, but you're going to be shocked at how porous this Canucks defense is. Demko's going to be facing Demko's going to be facing a lot of rubber this season. But let's end this episode with this, Lachlan. Look, Elias, Pettersson, and Quinn Hughes are going to sign pen to paper on Friday. We're recording this Friday morning. Probably sometime today, they're going to have to get their way back to Vancouver for Canucks training camp, which means some players who are there because Elias, Pettersson, and Quinn Hughes aren't there are now going to be I think first and foremost, my boy Nick Petan has unfortunately overstayed his welcome at this point with the Vancouver Canucks. Look, I would have loved to have him stay on the fourth line. It would have made all my predictions from the 2015 World Juniors somewhat come true, or at least have a bit of hope. But look, it was very clear he was a placeholder for Elias Pettersson, even by the fact that Brock was calling him Petey. So. He's not long for Canucks training camp. I think at this point, who else do you think, Lachlan, is going to hurt from Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes coming back to training camp?
For starters, Olli Juolevi, I think that's going to be a tough conversation.
Oh yeah, he's done.
He might stay until the end of training camp. Just
like we talked about on a couple episodes ago, he kills penalties. Like that's his saving grace.
That is his saving grace. And this team doesn't have a lot of penalty killers, so that might save him, frankly. But I do think eventually down the line, I think the spot that he's been playing in the early preseason games and in the early training camp match pairings have been kind of the holding the fort down until Quinn Hughes was available to take over. I think he's still. I think Juolevi can beat out Brad Hunt for that number 7 spot, but I think the odds are pretty slim. I think it's going to be a bit of a tough go for him. I think we mentioned Nick Petan is in a bit of a tougher spot right now. He's still here getting his opportunities, but I think the odds on him staying with the group are less and less. But that's fine. He's going to go to Abbotsford. He's going to play a lot of minutes, and he might get that call up later on. I think more it's going to be most of those guys. Maybe Justin Dowling is in a little bit of a tougher spot, or like Sheldon Dries, who's still trying to crack the roster. Any of like those fourth line guys who are, were very much brought in to be like depth for the Abbotsford team are going to be in a bit of a tougher situation. That is, of course, it could get harder depending on whether or not we get Brandon Sutter back or Travis Hamonic decides he's going to play. We haven't even really factored in that stuff yet because that could throw a whole other wrench into things. But as for, right now, I think mostly you're going to see guys like those guys
Yeah, and I think, someone like Alex Chason has earned his PTO deal, right? Like, I think he's going to be on this main roster by the time the regular season starts. Obviously, you've got, like, Michael Furlan's going to be on LTIR. Brandon Sutter is probably going to be on the IR. He has some sort of weird mystery illness that no one really knows about at this point, which kind of complicates things. Is Hamonic, today is October 1st, so we will have, by the end of the day, some sort of clarification on where Travis Hamonic stands. I was thinking, last night with the advancement in the Pettersson Hughes negotiations that maybe Hamonic has opted out because then they have, an extra $3 million cap space. But you look at the deals, they add up to what, 15 and a half, 16. I'm not very good at math. This is why I'm in podcasting, but it's going to be less than, it's going to be like, it's not going to be like close to 19 million, right? So if it's around the 16 million mark, that means they're still counting on, or still holding out hope that Travis Hamonic is still going to be in the lineup and be a part of this team in one way or another. I don't know how well of I don't think there's any appetite for him to be an unvaccinated player to be on this team, because you're going to be missing half the season.
Team already said no to that. Team already has told him no for sure. He can't.
Yeah, and good on the Canucks for holding that line, right? Like these players need to be, I think, vaccinated, not just for being, prominent members of the community as a whole, but just to be a functional NHL team, you do have to be doubly vaccinated. But yeah, it looks like Alex Chiasson has earned a spot, regardless if Pettersson and Hughes come back to training camp in a timely manner, right?
Yeah, I also think it's worth factoring in the idea that, let's say the Canucks whether or not Hamonic comes back, let's say that he doesn't come back, that they're factoring in to leave that money open for his replacement, for replacement and Chiasson as well, because that might factor in as well, is that whatever extra money is left over is going to go to Alex Chiasson
they're paying him $2 million a year. Like, what's going on there?
I think, with Chiasson, I think what'll be interesting is, I think in theory they might give him and this was actually something that my other podcast partner Cody Sievertson brought up yesterday, which was that they might give him the same deal as Brandon Sutter. They might essentially go and say, okay, the $1 million deal we gave to Sutter, we're going to give to Chiasson now, because if Sutter's not available. So essentially that's that quick replacement there that cancels out. And that leaves about $3 million or so for a replacement defenseman, say like Jason Demers, or who else might still be available in that market. They might not use all of it. They might leave a little bit extra left over for other fixes later on, which frankly would be the smart thing to do. If you don't have to spend all that, you don't have to spend to zero. You can leave a little bit of room. So
are you sure Jim Benning knows that? I don't think he knows that.
I don't know. I don't know for sure. I haven't gotten clarity on that, but you'd hope so. You hope he does, and you hope that they leave themselves some wiggle room for if team's looking good down in late in March, you never know. You might be able to buy someone pretty decent on the trade deadline. You want to leave yourself as many options and as many possibilities open as you can. And right now, it's kind of looking like they're going to get into a situation here where Chiasson is going to get his deal. He's going to get to play probably good minutes here. He's probably going to get some power play opportunities. And you might see them bring in a replacement defenseman for Hamonic, should he decide to opt out. And frankly, they could look like after worrying so much about the Canucks and their depth overall over the last couple weeks, we could be entering the season looking pretty decent right out of the gate here.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex Chiasson, just if you base all the practice lines we talked about yesterday, he's going to get a prominent opportunity to start, right? He's going to get power play time. He was playing with Bo Horvat and Tanner Pearson, which means top 6, top 9 for someone like Alex Chiasson. I agree with you in the sense that you don't have to spend that whole $3 million if Hamonic does opt out, right? Because look, $1 million defenseman, let's say Jason Demers takes $1 million. Is it really going to be that big of a needle mover if you're the Vancouver Canucks on the blue line for $1 million? I just say just keep the cap space in case something comes up, a trade opportunity comes up, and just kind of hold the line, because with Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes's new deals, you're gonna be right up against it if Hamonic does come back, right?
Yes, if Hamonic comes back, you're going to be right. You're going to be right up against that cap space. I will say that the depth helps. Like I think having like even if that $1 million defenseman for Demers, like sure that might eat into that 3 that's left. Like you'll only have about 2 or 2 plus left over. But I do think that like we've seen with the Canucks in the past, injuries often come to haunt them very quickly. And I think you want as many defensive chips as you can get, especially and low cost, no frill contracts for cheap depth is, in my opinion, always a good choice. I think it's something the Canucks really struggled at trying to do in years past. This year they really went all in on it, and you wish they had done it a lot sooner because it's great. It's great that they have a lot of options in the AHL and that they actually took the time to spend on cheap depth that they could bring up later on. That's what you want. That's what you want to be doing. I think Demers would, or any defenseman, I should say, really any defenseman you might bring for that $1 million price tag or lower is a good cheap buy that it's worth trying. It's worth bringing in and giving yourself as many opportunities to ice an NHL lineup as you possibly can.
Yeah, and the Canucks are going to have a fairly decent top 9 with Elias Pettersson back. The defense at least looks a lot better on paper with Quinn Hughes back. So do not fret, Canucks fans. Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, by all reports, going to be back in training camp with the main group very, very soon. But that has it for today's episode of Locked On Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And thank you once again for making Locked On Canucks your first listen of the day. And after this, make sure your second listen of the day is Locked On Bets. Betting on hockey doesn't have to be a guessing game if you listen to the new Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Get daily picks, blowout specials, the wrong team favorite picks, and Lee Sterling's Lock of the Day. Follow the Locked On Bets podcast brought to you by BetOnline.ag wherever you get podcasts. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Locked On Canucks and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have full episodes on YouTube every single day. Locked On Canucks there. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick Monty Lachlan. Where can the people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Lock in the Crease. You can find my writing work at lockinthecrease.com. I write there sometimes.
All right. Thank you once again for listening to Locked On Canucks today. See you on Monday.